Greetings once again, soccer fans, and welcome to the Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. I am one of your hosts, Nick Pateris, joined by my good friend and fellow host, Michael Yalmy. Mike, how are you tonight, and are you ready to talk soccer?
Doing awesome, man, and I am definitely ready to talk some soccer. It's Monday night, and how else would we spend our Monday nights other than talking some MLS and USA soccer?
Absolutely. Definitely not spending time with the wives, definitely not getting ahead on the work week, not doing household projects, but coming to you all live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and eventually on your podcasting platform. We'll be posting that later this evening so you can have it bright and early on your ride to work Tuesday morning. And as I said, if you want to join the conversation, please subscribe to our channel here on YouTube, like the video. Find us on Twitter at SOP Soccer, on Facebook at Sons of a Pitch Soccer. We're even on Instagram. We got to work on updating that a little bit more, but we're on there. You can follow along with us. And please send us a message. What do you want to see on the show? What are your thoughts on the way the league's going, the USMNT? If it's about American soccer, we will comment on it, and we love hearing from our fans, especially as we try to grow the game through conversation. So with that, Mike, are you ready to jump right in? You got any other housekeeping? Because there is a lot to talk about tonight.
There is. We got lots to talk about, so let's get right into it.
Fantastic. Well, one of the big headlines that I was kind of tracking over this weekend internationally from a broad soccer perspective was just how many MLS players have made the move from an MLS academy or an MLS first squad to one of the biggest leagues internationally. And this number continues to grow. I think it speaks volumes to what the league is doing, the influence the league's having, not to mention the sheer talent that the players are coming out. So I'm going to start with a list of players here, and then we're going to get into a few questions. And Mike, as I go through some of these players, feel free to jump in, give your thoughts on them, and let me know how you think they're going to play out a little bit here. So the biggest international kind of influence that MLS has is on the Bundesliga. There has been a long-standing relationship between the German league and the North American league, the Canadian American league, however you want to call it. And we know Bayern Munich has a partnership with FC Dallas, and we know that they signed Alphonso Davies from the Whitecaps. So there's a good pedigree there. And there's also a lot of Americans who didn't come up through MLS, like Christian Pulisic, who made the move to the Bundesliga before being catapulted into stardom elsewhere. Or guys like Fabian Johnson, who are still doing it over there in the Bundesliga. So here are a few MLS products now starring for teams in Germany. Gio Reyna, even though he's only 17 and I think the second youngest American to ever score in the Bundesliga behind Christian Pulisic, he started at the New York City NYCFC Academy. Now he's with Borussia Dortmund. We all know Tyler Adams playing for Red Bulls Leipzig, who came up through the Red Bulls Academy in New York. Alphonso Davies, Mike, one of your fellow Canadian brethren, coming up with Vancouver and making the move to Bayern Munich. And by the way, Matt Doyle had a great list, or has an article out. I haven't read the whole thing yet about who he thinks could be the next Alphonso Davies, who makes a big splash overseas. So go find that on MLSsoccer.com. A couple other guys that we're starting to see a little bit more of, or guys that we want to see more of in the Bundesliga. Chris Richards, who came up through the Dallas Academy, is part of Bayern Munich's squad. Hopefully he starts to get more first-team minutes and kind of work his way into the starting rotation. And, of course, Ulises Lanes came up with the Galaxy and is now playing for Wolfsburg alongside fellow USMNT player John Brooks. So those are the big names out of the Bundesliga. I'm sure there's a lot more Americans who are playing there, whether or not they had their start in the MLS. But we've seen great success with Gio Reyna, Tyler Adams, and Alphonso Davies. We expect big things from Chris Richards and Uli Lanes, a couple of names who people are throwing around to get on the USMNT senior team. So, Mike, what do you think the MLS has done to kind of prepare these players for playing in the Bundesliga, whether it's on the field or kind of an administrative function? What do you think's gotten them over there and helped them to succeed?
Well, I think it's more the Bundesliga being open to signing these guys and giving them minutes. That's something that the other leagues haven't been doing. So I think it's more on the Bundesliga kind of turning into that league by itself, not necessarily MLS focusing on a certain league and saying, well, yeah, that's kind of where we want to start directing our guys to go. I think a lot of that started with Jurgen Klinsmann, the head of USMNT, back, God, 6 years ago now, something like that.
Seems like forever.
Right. And, and then having the players that he would find that were playing in the Bundesliga that had some type of connection to the U.S. And kind of, forming his team that way. So I think that's kind of those couple things have probably helped the most on making the Bundesliga a place for U.S. players.
Absolutely. Of course, there's a huge American influence with the military bases there. So you find a lot of dual citizen, dual national, American, German young players coming up through the ranks of the German leagues, maybe coming back to America to play in the MLS a bit or vice versa. So there's cultural ties, there's political ties, and of course now we've got the soccer ties, which is fantastic. A couple names that obviously stick out in the English Premier League, Zach Steffen, who came up with Philly's Youth Academy, also got obviously lots of starts and quality time with the Columbus Crew. Now with Manchester City, he's been training with their first team after being out on loan last season. So we do expect to see Zach Steffen get a few starts for Manchester City this season. And also Jack Harrison from NYCFC, playing days. I don't think he came up for their academy. I think he played on their senior team for a little bit. But he is had a couple great games for Leeds United, had a couple goals against champion Liverpool in their opener, and I think he bagged another one in Leeds' second game. So you've got guys who quality talent scoring in these leagues. Mike, did Jack Harrison kind of miss out on his time at New York City, or did he just shine so brightly that he got to move relatively quickly?
No, I think he was an English player, and he was kind of went through the ranks in England a little bit in their academies, and then came over to the U.S. A little bit before college, like high school time. And I remember with that draft, he ended up getting drafted, I think, second overall or third, got traded around, something like that. But there was a big claim by New York City FC to try and get him as a homegrown player before that draft. And that didn't work out because he didn't spend enough time with the academy or whatever, and went to New York City and did well there for a couple of years to elevate himself back to the type of player where he could get into some games in England. So it was the right move for him. He played his cards right for sure. And he had the opportunity to grow a little bit here in MLS. And I think it kind of goes back to some of that, the things you were saying there with Cameron Young, where when you're 13 in England, if you haven't hit this superstardom level or potential level, then they don't even look at you anymore. And I think that might have happened with Jack Harrison. So he decided, all right, let's go over to the U.S. and, see if I can get a college scholarship or whatever, and then play here for a little bit and then go back as a much better player and try and get in that way. So I think that's with him.
Absolutely. And thanks for bringing up that interview with Cameron Young. For our newer listeners, a couple of months ago, I interviewed Cameron Young, who is a product of is currently with the Plymouth Argyle Academy over in Britain, in England. So go back, find that interview. It's on our website, www.sonsofapitchsoccer.com. And he talks about like how difficult it is to really make it, in these leagues, make it to a large club, like the ones that we're seeing in the Premier League and the Championship. If you don't stand out by the time you're, 12, 13, 14, then you've got to kind of shift focus and either, like Harrison, find another league to get into, whether it's NCAA or MLS, youth teams, USL, etc., or get into a lower level tier in England, Spain, France, some of the amateur type leagues, semi-pro leagues, and then have to work your way up. Work for Jamie Vardy at Leicester City, but again, he's probably more the exception than the rule. And Jack Harrison might also be a little bit more the exception than the rule. But that's what I love about American soccer. There's so many pathways to the pros, to borrow a phrase, right? You got soccer, or you got college soccer, you've got the draft, you've got the academy. you've got semi-pro leagues. There's so many ways that you can get noticed, and we're going to talk about the new MLS program and academy program, MLS Next, in just a little bit. But continuing kind of our review around Europe, another USMNT player, Tim Weah, in League One, came up through Red Bull's academy. He's now playing for Lille over in France. A lot of people are pumped up about him. We're also going to mention the biggest transfer from the international USMNT side of things. Weston McKennie moves from Schalke to Juventus, the first American to play for Juventus, and one of the few handful of Americans to actually play in Serie A. Now, Mike, you've kind of followed the Italian league a little bit. What is it with Serie A that they don't usually sign American players when we've seen so many play in so many different places?
Yeah, I think with Serie A, they're kind of old school. A majority of their players, a large majority of their players, are Italian based, so they're all Italian nationals. Kind of like the way MLS has rules with international spots and that kind of stuff. Serie A is similar in that I don't know if they have the exact same rules like that, but similar to the fact that it's mostly all Italians, and then occasionally they have some odd European country guys, some African players come in. Very rarely do CONCACAF guys go over there. So I don't know if that's just the way of attrition, so to say. But really the thing that sticks out to my mind is, for me as an Inter Milan player or fan, all of their players are, that's kind of their claim to fame, is that they go after more of the international players and not necessarily just the Italian players. And God, now there's like 5 or 6 Italians on Inter right now. Not many, but all the other rosters they've got, out of their 18, they've got 14 of them. So sure. Serie A, I think that over time, I think we might see that change a little bit. But yeah, it's a big accomplishment for Weston McKennie, especially getting picked up by a club like Juve. That's huge.
Right. And you're absolutely right that there's definitely the roster rules and regulations are part of it. Because as we saw with their pursuit of Weston McKennie, they have to use an international spot on him. And then they're pursuing Luis Suarez from Barcelona. Well, Suarez was able to apply for Italian citizenship. So they were just waiting for him to pass that test. That way he can use kind of a domestic player slot versus an international or European type of thing. So there's definitely rules there in place. And I don't know how long those rules have been there, though. I'd be interested to find that. If any of our listeners or Serie A fans know how long they've had these rules, please let us know. Because I remember not too long ago, the Italian head coach, and I forget who it was, I want to say it was around the 2014 World Cup maybe, came out and said, we want our best players playing in Italy, and we want a roster full of Italians playing in Italy. Like, it was a clear directive that that's how their soccer federation wanted to kind of build from within and promote their own players. And Mike, from following TFC and Javinko, like, he didn't get too many looks, partly because of him developing later in his career, but partly because he was playing in the MLS, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things when he came over. It was like, well, he's done getting any call-ups for Italy. Well, it turns out he ended up getting a few call-ups from Conte when he was the coach, because Conte was the coach at Juventus, knew him very well. But as soon as Conte was out as Italy manager, that was it for Javinko, just because he played in MLS. Didn't matter what he was doing. And even the Italian fans were screaming for him. Bring Javinko in. We want Javinko. He can do a free kick like nobody else in the world, other than like Messi and maybe Ronaldo, truly. And they were clamoring for that. Bring a guy off the bench, 60th, 70th minute. He's got the talent to play for us. Why is he not playing well? Because he's not playing in Italy. Simple as that. So
right. And what's interesting to note too, who's the coach at Juventus right now? Andrea Pirlo, Italian megastar, former NYCFC player as well. I don't know if he finished his career in New York or if he jumped to some other small league for a year or two. But he played in MLS, so he maybe has a little bit more insight of how teams are developing players. Then again, Weston McKennie playing at Schalke, the quality that you're getting there. He was probably the best player for them this season. So it goes without saying the move to Juventus is deserved for McKennie. By the way, played a full 90. A lot of people thought maybe he'd come in as a late sub or get a spot, like get a start and then maybe a halftime. Nope, played a full 90 in their 3-0 win. I think he even assisted on one of the goals. But great move from McKennie. And again, something else we're going to need to see American players going to Italy and continuing that. It was McKennie, Michael Bradley, Alexi Lalas. I think there was an American like in the 40s or 50s who played in Italy as well. That's about it. So Italian Soccer League, if you're tuning in, which would be weird if you were, do some scouting here in the MLS. Anyway, just to kind of wrap up a few of the smaller leagues as well. We've got the Reggie Cannon move to Portugal at Boa Vista, the Premier League over there. And by the way, it just cracks me up, Mike. Like U.S. soccer Twitter is ridiculous because someone was talking about Reggie Cannon going to the Premier League. And someone's like, "You idiot, you spelled it wrong." It's like, no, guy, it's not Spanish, it's Portuguese. Like, oh my God, just the craziness that's out there and just the sheer blindness of some people. But anyway, we've got Reggie Cannon now playing there. Albert Elise just finalized his deal, so even though he wasn't exactly a youth product here in the MLS, definitely made a name for himself at Houston. Down in Liga MX, Bofo Saucedo, your guy, Mike, one of your favorites to watch. When he was with Real Salt Lake, he's now playing at Pumas south of the border. And one other thing to mention, too, we've got a lot of guys who are over in the Netherlands. So we've got Alex Mendez, who came up with the Galaxy, Richie Ledesma with RSL, and Chris Gloster of our Red Bulls New York Academy. Those three guys are all rostered at Young PSV in the Eredivisie. It's the second division, but it is PSV Eindhoven's feeder team, essentially. So in the next couple of years, all these U.S. youth players and MLS Academy products are going to be seeing time at the top club in the Netherlands who are getting Europa and Champions League experience and probably moving on to bigger clubs in the next 4 or 5 years. So guys to watch and on the rise. So with that summary out of the way, Mike, I kind of want to shift a little bit here. Everyone's been talking about, look at these great MLS players, the guys that MLS is developing, that are being developed in Canadian and American academies. When do we go from MLS development to specific academy development? We're already starting to see it with the Red Bulls in Dallas, and to a lesser extent, maybe the Galaxy. You know, they've got a lot of guys coming in from Mexico and Central America. When do we start to say, oh my gosh, the Red Bulls Academy has produced 15 top world-class players instead of the MLS is doing it? How long?
I'd have to say probably about 15 years. Probably you're going to go through another generation, so to say, of players, probably like 6-year, 7-year area of players. These academies are still very young. In the grand scheme of things, right? I mean, even the Red Bulls Academy really started up as an academy in the mid 2000s. So, it's not a long time when you're considering a lot of these other clubs. So I think, you'll probably go through right now we're getting the odd person here and there. I think you'll start to see more kids going over, and then probably within about 15 years should have a pretty heavy base of players where, you're getting more than enough to continue to grow your club. I mean, there's a reason why these teams, these team presidents, these team owners, MLS keeps throwing all this money at the academy players. It's the worst investment in the world right now, Nick. I mean, you figure you sell some of these guys for what, maybe $2-3 million. It's not worth it. It costs a ton of money to house, coaches for all of these different teams, playing grounds for all of these different teams, traveling for all these different teams. They feed these kids, they house these kids. I mean, this isn't like, oh, it's just it's cheap. No, it's not. It's really expensive. So if how things are going right now and the amount of return that they're getting on their investment right now, it's not worth doing. So it should get better in the future. And if it doesn't, I'm sure at some point you'll see an end to this, academy stuff pretty quick.
Well, it did end. The U.S. Development Academy program went under right at the outset of the pandemic.
That's not MLS.
Well, I'm saying like that went under and is now leading into the next development, the MLS Next, where you've got like 190 some clubs from MLS, USL, and then local academies, amateur leagues, semi-pro teams, independent clubs. They've all joined into this, MLS Next Academy style massive network. But you're right, Mike. Like the LA Galaxy they folded some of their girls' academies. I think Minnesota even folded some of their youth academies, because you're right. It's a lot if you're going to have an academy from like the U10, U12 level up through U23 and then a senior team. It's a huge expense, and it only pays off if you sell an Alphonso Davies, where you can pocket 10 million and kind of keep yourself going for the next 3 years. From my perspective, it's like, you're a tiny little law firm, solo practice. You get that $1 million injury case settlement, and then you're set for like the next 3-4 years of running your practice.
Yep.
So you're right. The academy system was struggling from a bookkeeping standpoint, but with the MLS Next system, when you cast such a wide net, you're going to capture a lot more talent. I think that's true in everything, whether it's soccer scouting, whether it's hiring at your company, whether it's whatever you want to do. Cast a wide net and have a good system for identifying talent. I think that's what they're developing now. What I've seen so far is you get these guys who kind of get identified early by the U.S. youth teams, and then they get picked up by some of the clubs overseas. All the names we just went over are guys who have really made their names playing U.S. U17, U20, U23 type World Cup games versus, blossoming into this academy product. And then they get bought by these clubs in Europe who can develop them. We're identifying talent. The European clubs are snatching them up at a deal and developing them. You're right. I think it's going to take another generation of players before we go from identifying, or where we go to identifying and developing, and then maybe keeping 2 or 3 of those guys in your senior club and winning some trophies here at home. So that's kind of my take on it. Any other thoughts on that before we kind of get on to our next headline?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is creating a culture within these teams as well as these players to say, hey, the next step at 16, 17 years old isn't going to Europe. The next step is getting onto your first team in MLS, your senior team in MLS, becoming a solid player, a la Reggie Cannon, a la Alphonso Davies, that type of build where you're going to get a few years in MLS in the first team, and then you're going to get sold for a bigger amount of money. Now, Reggie Cannon obviously wasn't even close to Alphonso Davies, but in that type of mold, rather than, you see a lot of these guys where they're not getting the minutes in MLS, and there's a reason for that. It's the way the salary cap is. It's the way the international roster spots are, the way that they're building these rosters. That's why that stuff needs to change in order to continue to grow the league. And it's not just as far as being able to compete and have better players. It's the academy as well. So, that's there's a fine balance with it, but that's what needs to happen next. And hopefully, they bring these guys on. Ayo Akinola in Toronto is a good example of this, right? He came up through the TFC Academy and US U20 player out of Detroit. He lived in Canada for some period of time or whatever. Comes up with the TFC Academy, and I believe it was Werder Bremen and another German league team were like, hey, we want you. We're going to buy you for $500,000, $700,000, whatever. And TFC was like, no, we're going to give you a first-team contract. And they did. And they said, just be patient with us. And now look at him. It's been 2 years since that happened. But now he's actually getting the minutes. So and he's producing in those minutes. So that's the way these players need to go. And MLS Next is going to help with that just because you're casting that much bigger net. And you've got that MLS branding, which will help. So I think that overall, I think that's a good move there for MLS to bring that up. If they're going to put the investment in, which is what they're looking like they're going to do, and they've been doing, then, now or never, put it in, put your money where your mouth is, and make sure it grows.
There you go. So kind of using that as a segue, like we said, how appealing the MLS is to a lot of these international players who are competing with our homegrowns, with our American Canadian products. Gonzalo Higuain, we all know, made the transfer from Juventus to Inter Miami, and he's the brother of Federico Higuain, who's of Columbus Crew fame and now DC United player coach. Their father, Mr. Higuain, I forget his first name right now, did an interview with Felipe Cardenas explaining just why the MLS is so appealing to players from Argentina and probably to players from all over South and Central America, if not the whole world. And he says it comes down to a few things. I mean, one, it's very trendy right now. The MLS is the up-and-coming thing. It's the cool thing. We're kind of like the hipsters of the soccer world. Hipster Soccer Podcast, guys. If you're listening, there you go. We're not just club culture hipsters. Like the whole MLS is kind of hipster movement. It's trendy right now. But more so, the league is very well managed. It's got solid finances. And if you're going to come to play in the MLS, you're going to have an excellent quality of life living in America and Canada. So those things are very appealing. Now, Mike, this is something that we've been saying for a while on our show. I'm going to assume you're going to agree with Mr. Higuain here. And do you expect to see more South American players trying to get into the MLS, and then how does the league balance that with our homegrowns who we do want to see come up and play?
Yeah, I think you will, because it is trendy. It is a growing league. And I think that's helped, especially by the NBA, NFL, NHL, all that. The big leagues in sports, other than soccer, are all in the U.S. So I think that there's kind of this notion of, well, hey, the MLS in America is going to become the best league in the world eventually. It's going to happen, right? That's kind of like just the thought process for most people. So I think not to mention the lifestyle in the US is much different, and to be able to go to the grocery store without getting hounded is huge. And that's you're getting paid a lot of money, and you're still having fun in competitive soccer, and you don't get bothered that much. So it's, there are definitely a lot of pluses with that. So I think the trend will continue now as far as balancing it with those academy players and whatnot. It's a fine line. There's a fine line on how we need to balance that and everything. So that's why I'm glad I'm just a podcaster and not actually in the league office trying to figure that one out, because that one would be tough. Right. And hey, we got Rocky joining us here. You blokes are far from hipsters, LOL. What's up, guys? Hey, Rocky, how you doing, man? Yeah, not even close. Would not call myself a hipster at all.
No, but you're right, Mike. It's funny balancing, developing players versus bringing in talent, right? From an organizational standpoint, your goal is to win. Your goal is to put on the best roster that you could possibly have. Now, how do you do that? You bring in transfers from overseas, you find the best players, you scout, or you also develop your own homegrown players. And maybe if a couple, 3 of your academy products turn into starters, that's great. I think that's kind of how even some of the major clubs and leagues overseas, if you can get 2 or 3 starters from your academy system on your top flight team, I think that's great. And then you complement it with transfers and other moves you might make, loan players that you could pick up. So the issue then becomes all those other guys that the MLS is developing, where do they go? If you've got a class of 10, 12 guys who are ready to break into the senior team, but only 2 or 3 of them can hack it against everyone else you've brought in internationally, transfers, etc., what do you do with the other 9 or 10 guys? Do you just say, thanks, sorry, you're free agents now, best of luck? Or is there a market to sell them and make some money off of it and spread the influence? Hopefully it's the latter, but like you said, another generation, and that hopefully is going to be the case. So wrapping that discussion up, now we're going to move into guys who have transferred around, who have made their mark on the league, who, in the opinion of some, not me, should just retire and let these youngsters get up and make their case. But hey, if you're playing as well as Kei Kamara is playing this far into your career, then God bless you and keep doing it. Kei Kamara now has been traded from Colorado to Minnesota United. He has been traded for an undisclosed amount of allocation money. I'm sure it'll get disclosed within days, and also a 2022 draft pick, and that's per Jeff Carlisle of ESPN. So What stands out, though, about Kei Kamara, he has now set a record or tied the record for most MLS teams played, and the name of the other players escaping me. Kei Kamara has now played on 8. That's right, 8. You got to use 2 hands when you're counting on fingers. 8 MLS teams, including Columbus, San Jose, Houston, Sporting Kansas City, Columbus again, New England, Vancouver, Colorado, and now Minnesota United. Over his 17 MLS year career, he's played in 352 games, has 129 goals, 46 assists, but crazy enough, only 4 playoff appearances. It's like the one thing missing from his resume. And of course, I chose to use not only his Twitter handle picture, Soccer for All, but the fact that he really has played soccer for just about everyone. Kind of playing off of that message there. So congrats to Kei Kamara on a move to a team who's poised to make a run and to do some great things, to continuing his career. He even was loaned out for a year in the English Championship and played another season in the Premier League. I think it was Middlesbrough and Norwich City. So he did get a chance over in England and has just flourished in the MLS. So that's kind of the background on everything. But Mike, how is this going to affect? Let's bring it back now. How is this going to affect the Colorado Rapids? And how is this going to affect Minnesota United having a player of Kamara's experience and skill?
Yeah, Colorado's fine. They wouldn't have made the move if they didn't think they'd be okay. So I think they'll be fine. They got enough talent there, especially with the youngster Shinya Shiki and some of those other guys.
Jonathan Lewis, yeah.
Jonathan Lewis, so I think they'll be fine. I think for Minnesota, it's a great option to have off the bench. That is probably the best case scenario for them, right? They've got their young players. I think they'll be all right as Rocky comes in and says, Kei changes teams like a girl changes clothes. That's great. And then Kei Kamara, hashtag all teams matter. I like it. So
if we can make that t-shirt and send it out to him, that would be phenomenal. That'd be amazing.
That would be cool. No, but I think it's a really good setup for him in Minnesota. He's going to have a lot of service, and I think he's gonna do well in Minnesota. And Jose Mera joins us as well.
Hey,
Kamara is the Zlatan of MLS. So there you go.
He's a bit of a lion, and he definitely can find the back of the net. So I'll give you that comparison.
Yep, he scores tons of goals. The guy just keeps scoring. It's surprising to me. You're just figuring, all right, the guy's done now, and he just keeps on coming through and scoring goals. So a good pickup for Minnesota United.
Absolutely, and they need the depth. They've been plagued by injuries lately. They need the attacking presence. Right now, listed on their club website, they only have 4 forwards, strikers, whatever. That's how the website calls them, forwards. You've got Luis Amaria, who's an international player from Paraguay. You've got Kei Kamara now, who, by the way, everyone, a Sierra Leone international player and who's made appearances for their national team. You also have Aaron Schoenfeld from Knoxville and Mason Toye from South Orange, New Jersey. So you would expect that it would be Amaria and Toye as your 2 strikers, Schoenfeld and Kamara as your backups, but I think Mason Toye picked up a knock and he may miss some time, so you're able to slot Kamara in maybe for a spot start or bring him in off the bench. The other aspect to bringing in Kamara to a young striking core like Amaria and Toye and maybe some of their other midfielders is he's got experience. He can be a leader in the locker room. He can be a coach on the field. He can take these guys under his wing and continue to kind of groom them and guide them up, especially a guy like Mason Toye, who a lot of people are high on, who want him to be the next big striker in the MLS and compete for a spot on the U.S. men's national team. So a lot going on there. As far as Colorado, though, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players listed as forwards, including Nicholas Benazet, Brian Galvan, Matt Hunley, Nicky Jackson, Jonathan Lewis, Nicholas Mosqueda, Diego Rubio, and last year's Rookie of the Year, Andre Shinashiki. So Colorado accumulated some great assets on their roster and making a good move, getting a draft pick and some cash for Kei Kamara. But Mike, how do you feel about them making a trade to a conference team? Would you rather have seen him go to the Eastern Conference, or does that even matter in the MLS?
It doesn't really matter. I mean, with the conferences, playoffs is based off the conferences, but right now this year with the expanded format, 8 teams out of the West getting in, 10 in the East. It's less of a concern this year than it always has been. But again, if you're going to make a move and you've got an opportunity to make that deal, I think the number one thing is some of the salary as well that Colorado was able to shed. With that, I think they know they have some backups. It's kind of like a team coming to Toronto FC and saying, "Hey, we'll take Josie Altidore for a 4th-round pick," and $800K in GAM. I mean, they might look at that because he's not, right. I mean, they're not. What I'm saying, but basically, is if the time's right, you strike the deal, and I think that's probably what happened in this case, regardless if it's a Western Conference team or not.
Sure. And isn't allocation money essentially like monopoly money right now because they're phasing out
pretty much
targeted?
They're phasing out TAM, right? They're phasing out TAM.
Yeah. So it's monopoly money. It's all right. We're playing with house money, right? Whatever. Do you want me to do the Chicago Fire Hot Minute, or should we get into our sponsor break and save the fire for the second half, Mike?
Yeah, let's knock out the sponsor break and then we'll jump in with some Fire Hot Minute and as well some roundup from last weekend. So with that being said, let's jump right into our hydration break, brought to you by Skira Icelandic Water. You can find it at any 7-Eleven in the United States. Go get some Skira Icelandic spring water. It is the best Icelandic water out there. At least I think so. But don't tell our other sponsors. Nice premium Iceland Pure Spring Water. They think they have the best Icelandic spring water. They're based out of Walgreens. So if you're at Walgreens, get some nice premium Iceland Pure Spring Water. If you're at 7-Eleven, pick up some Skira. So thank you to you guys for definitely helping us financially, as well as our third sponsor, Donovan Food Brokerage. K through 12 service here in the Midwest. All your food service needs in the Midwest of the USA, they will take care of you there in the restaurant industry and the food distribution industry. So make sure to look out for Donovan Food Brokerage. You can visit their website at www.donovanfoodbrokerage.com and go check them out as well. So thank you guys for sponsoring us and letting us continue to grow our business and our podcast.
And if anyone, individual or business, is looking for sponsorship opportunities, please reach out to us on Twitter at SOP Soccer. Email us, podcast@sonsofapitchsoccer.com. We're happy to talk kind of our coverage, our influence, our data as our listeners, and work something out with you. If you want to promote your business or any other cause here on the show, we can figure that on out. So we look forward to working with you. In fact, I'd love to get a Chicago local business or person to sponsor our Hot Minute on the Chicago Fire as we look at what happened with the Chicago Fire this week. And I'm going to call this one the Orlando Rains doused the fire. It was a wet start, and the fire just could not get lit down in Orlando. They ended up losing 4-1. And by the way, maybe we'll do some sponsorship where, like, for every pun, you give us like $5 or something like that, and I'll just keep it coming as we go. Like, it can really drive the price up. But anyway, it comes down to the same old story for the Chicago Fire, failing to convert the opportunities they have and terrible defending. And again, Matt Doyle on MLS Soccer points out that these aren't like young guys who are just trying to find their way in the league and having defensive lapses. Like, these are veteran players, guys who've been with Chicago or in the league for a bit and who are just having breakdowns. And yes, Jose Mira, gosh, if they could bring back Cuauhtemoc Blanco, that would be something. But man, my memories of Blanco are a lot different from a lot of other people's. I just remember him like just kind of jogging around the center circle for most of the game. And then as soon as the ball got into the offensive third, he'd make a run. But he did a lot of great stuff for the Mexico men's national team, and a lot of Chicago Fire fans love him. My eye test did not work for me for Cuauhtemoc Blanco. But getting back to the Chicago Fire, terrible defending on top of failing to create opportunity or failing to convert opportunities. Looking at some of the advanced metrics over on infogol.com, the Chicago Fire's expected goals allowed this season is 19.4 over the course of, I think, 9 games now, or 11 games. but their actual goals allowed is 22. So they're allowing 3 more goals than their average. They're allowing 2 goals a game. And by the way, their only 2 shutouts were against FC Cincinnati. So nothing to brag about there. So the Chicago Fire's defense really needs to shore it up. And we've talked about how they've neglected signing some good defensive players. The other part of it is the kind of the dysfunction within the team, Mike. And I don't know if you saw this replay. Chicago Fire were awarded a penalty in the first half, and Beric and Medran were fighting over who's going to take the penalty. And it ended up Calvo, the captain, had to take Beric and walk him away and just let Medran take it. And he did, and it was saved by the Orlando City goalkeeper. So that kind of imploded and just made it go from bad to worse there for the Chicago Fire. However, in the second half, Beric got a penalty kick opportunity and converted it. What was odd, and this calls into question the coaching, don't you have an assigned penalty taker at all times? Like when you go into a game, like, you know, this guy's taking the penalties when they come, or at least say whoever drew the foul is taking the penalty. Wiki was asked post-game and said, no, I didn't assign anyone, but at halftime I made the decision to assign Beric. So even though the Fire played a better second half, they ironed out a few wrinkles, same problems, failing to convert, defensive lapses, and just that little bit of dysfunction that just hasn't seemed to go away since the new ownership and coaching change. So that's my hot minute on the Chicago Fire. Mike, feel free to jump in, or we can dive right into the league roundup.
No, I got to talk about the Fire for a minute.
Oh,
two things there. One is Chicago Fire are in last place.
In the conference? In the conference?
In the conference.
Okay.
In the conference and in MLS. 9 points. 9 points out of 12 games played. That's a 0.75 point per game average and a goal differential of -10. Second worst in the league, San Jose, but that's probably because of their 7-0 beatdown or 7-1 beatdown to Seattle earlier. They'd be tied with San Jose otherwise if it wasn't for that.
And Portland just beat them 6-1.
Oh, right. Okay. So, it's not looking good for Chicago Fire. Second thing, Wiki has now lost the locker room. It's gone. There is one play in soccer that can expedite that process, like exponentially. Just make that turn on its head in just a heartbeat. And that is when two players start arguing over a free kick or a penalty, and especially with the penalty, and then it gets saved. It's over. It's done. When that happens, you better pray to God that the guy that gets it scores it. Because if he doesn't, it's over. And that is not good for the Chicago Fire. And then for Wiki to come out and say afterwards, oh, yeah, I didn't have anybody assigned. What the hell are you doing? You're the head coach of a Major League Soccer franchise. How do you just not have a player assigned? That's basic stuff. How do you not now if the players go off of that, sometimes that'll happen, right? So if he said, no, I assigned Medran, or I assigned Beric and Medran was being a complete asshole and took it, then, it's not on the coach. That's on the players, and they got to work that out. But this one's on the coach. He should have never came out and said anything. I mean, I do appreciate the honesty, but dude, what the hell are you doing, man? You're failing as a coach in MLS. So those are my thoughts on the Chicago Fire. I say they've got to give it some time for this rebuild for next year. This year's not going to work for the rebuild. I still think they probably should have brought in a couple big names just to sell some tickets at Soldier Field. Obviously, they couldn't sell any tickets right now if they tried. But for next season, maybe we look at one of those DPs that's maybe not working out so well and get themselves a big name guy to try and draw some butts in the seats because they need something. So I'm going to leave that one alone and get into some of this.
Well, I gotta give you the counterpoint on that, Mike, because he may have locker room, but when Beric when they drew a penalty in the second half, Medran was the first person to go up and pat Beric on the back before he took the penalty. He was the first person to celebrate with him when he converted it. Now, was that good optics, or did Wiki say this stuff ends now and we're going to go back out and we're going to play a real game? So unless there's some reporter out there who's putting out that he has lost the locker room. I think it remains to be determined at this point, just because of how they responded in the second half. I mean, it was all for naught. They ended up losing 4-1 to a hot Orlando team, but you did see improvement, and you did see them kind of put that behind them. So I wanted to get the counterpoint. I wanted to have both sides of it. That's the lawyer in me. But we can move on to some of the games. How do teams, coaches lose locker rooms? Complete stupidity and ineptness. And that's exactly what we have here. So maybe right now everything's fine, but a couple more weeks of getting their ass kicked and a couple more dust-ups and a couple more guys sitting in the corner of the locker room pissed off. Who knows? But anyways, let's get into some of these games. We go all the way back to the 16th, which was last Wednesday. FC Dallas 4, Colorado 1. San Jose and Portland draw 1-1. Vancouver and Montreal. Vancouver gets the victory to send Toronto FC through to the Canadian Championship final, whenever that may be. We don't have a scheduled date yet for that. And then Seattle. Opponent is Forge FC.
What's that?
Is it the
Forge FC
or Forge FC?
It is the Hamilton Forge.
All right.
So yep, it'll be that's a big rivalry there in the CFL, Hamilton and Toronto. So maybe this is the start of a real rivalry between those teams if they can, because the Forge have been good. They won. This is their second championship in a row now. They've been the class of the league. Seattle beats up on LAFC 3-0. Seattle keeps on rolling, and LAFC keeps on not playing well. So Dallas and Colorado, you had a Twitter message. Why don't you go ahead and explain yourself on that?
We actually were contacted by Steve W. via Twitter, who tweets a lot about kind of spreads and gambling and MLS and stuff like that. And he's got some good stuff. So, check our follower list out. Go look for Steve W. And then he's got a whole series of numbers after that. He asked my take on it. I said, look, I think it's going to be a 1-1 game. If you look at the team's expected goals and actual goals, if you look at the metrics, they're not high-scoring teams. In fact, Dallas hasn't scored 4 goals all season. I would doubt if the over was over 4, and it's more likely going to be a 1-1 draw. And, of course, MLS going MLS, and Dallas goes off for 1 on Colorado. I hope in your picks and predictions you did better than I did on that one, Mike.
I did, because I picked Dallas to win that game. So at least we had it covered there, because you did tell him, hey, go watch Mike's picks and predictions so you can blame him if he's wrong.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, man.
Steve W. I listen to Mike instead of me, at least on that take.
Because looking at these notes here, Nick, and it's, it is crazy. My picks and predictions have been trash lately. I'll be the first to admit it. This has been an extremely unpredictable MLS season. Mm-hmm. I think that has a lot to do with MLS always had that home field advantage. That was a very heavy, you go down and you look at the standings over the past few years, and you would see a lot of good home records and, a lot of bad road records. Well, right now, that's not really the case. You're getting road teams are getting results, a lot of the time because there's no fans in the building. So that's, I think, a big part of it too. But, it's been crazy this season. Results like even on that Wednesday night, San Jose and Portland, it was a shoe-in for Portland.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't happen. And look what they did later in the week, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at it here. Of the, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 16. First of all, that's crazy. 16 games, within the week, half of them coming on one day. You've had 7 road victories. So you're right. That home field advantage, absolutely gone. But let's take a look at some of those games, some of those September 19th games. Kansas City drops to Dallas 3-2. New England and New York City draw 0-0. Atlanta, continuing the downward spiral, falling victim to Miami 2-1. Cincinnati, excellent job for FC Cincinnati, taking out the Red Bulls 1-0, and then Columbus continues their hot streak, beating Nashville 2-0. Now, the big story about those slate of games was SKC and Dallas, where Peter Vermees went off on FC Dallas and their time wasting, calling it despicable and sportsmanlike unethical. We're trying to get people to watch our games, and nobody wants to see this. I think Johnny Russell, SKC striker, had a little better take. He's like, look, we all do it. I'm not going to blame them for gamesmanship and for trying to manage the clock. But, Mike, what else can you do? The referee issued 6 yellow cards to Dallas. 4 were for time wasting. I think one of their players even picked up a second yellow and is going to get a red card suspension because he was time wasting. Like, what else can you do about this?
There's nothing you can do if the referee's giving out the cards and that was the case. But that just shows how important of a victory that was for Dallas to take out Sporting Kansas City in Kansas City. That was a big big game for them. They're like, well, a player can go off on a red because their next match isn't as important. It's not as tough. So I'm not sure who they have next, but there's nothing you can do about it. I hate to see it. And I'm with Peter Vermees. I'm the same way. Like, play the damn game, but you play the game to win. And however you do that, sometimes it's not going to be pretty. Sometimes people aren't going to like it, but you play to win.
Yep. And their next match is Wednesday night against Atlanta. So non-conference, bottom of the table team. You could probably stand if you're going to miss a game on a red card suspension, I guess that's the one to miss. Definitely take the points against Kansas City any way you can. You want to take the next group?
Yeah, so we got Red Bulls and Cincinnati. Cincinnati gets the victory in this one, 1-0. Columbus and Nashville. Columbus scores 2 in the second half to win 2-0 and continue their hot run. I mean, this team is on fire at the top of MLS with 27 points, and it's not even close. DC United and Toronto FC finished 2-2, another example of Toronto FC not being able to finish off a game. Rough ending there for TFC. Horrible defending gaffe by Omar Gonzalez. Should have let the ball go to the keeper. He heads it out, and the youngster Griffin Yao, one of our breakout youngsters, Donovan Pines, the other breakout youngster that we said, and Kevin Paredes all had great games for DC United. So that was cool. They're making us look good from that standpoint. Orlando, as we mentioned, beats the Fire 4-1, and then Houston and Minnesota tied 2-2. So I want to talk a little bit more about this TFC game. So, TFC coming off the high of winning the Canadian Championship of the MLS portion, right, to head to the final. And then you combine that with the low of going up against a bottom-of-the-table team, as well as traveling now, starting a road trip, a 3-month, 4-month, possibly long road trip in the USA. I listened to an episode of Footy Talks with a couple of the TSN guys and Bill Manning, the president for TFC. And there were no bones about it, man. He was 100% honest about it. Players are pissed. Players are not happy. They know that that's their job and they have to do it. And, they're appreciative of the fact that they have a job, but they hate the fact that they are not going to be able to be home, that they're going to be on the road for such a long time. I mean, to the point where TFC literally even said that they are giving up training days, multiple days off and training days, so that guys can go back to Canada to see their family at the airport and then come right back.
Right.
I mean, it's
quarantine if they left, right?
Right. So, it's like that right there, just the mental state. Now, I'm the first one to say, you know what, put your big boy pants on and get on with it. But when you're coming off a high like that of getting the Canadian Championship victory to going into a road trip like that with playing against a subpar team, if they were going up against Columbus like they are, New York City on Wednesday and then Columbus the next on Sunday, I think they would have came out a little bit better. So kind of the perfect storm for them against DC in a game that they control most of the game, and they probably should have won. But, sure. Overall, it was a good live stream reaction, man. We had lots of communication, lots of talk, lots of chat in this one. Daniel Young was on, gave us lots of good questions. It was really it was a really good live stream reaction. A little bit low on the views. We only had I think 900 or so. But, it was overall, it was good conversation. It was lots of fun. So we missed you, Nick. And we'll have to see you next Sunday night late. We're going to have a real late night next Sunday night, man, at And speaking of that,
I'll be ready.
We'll put this up here. Our next live stream reaction will be next Sunday night. The LA Galaxy hosting the Seattle Sounders. And yes, if you pay close enough attention, I am giving away my final pick of the night, as well as this will be my slide to promote that final game of the week in my picks and predictions show that I'll be doing either later tonight or at some point tomorrow. Not sure. But, we'll be there for that live. So put it in your calendars. Come hang out with us. Talk with us a little bit. And, and then we got Jay Jardine 29 on Twitter, our buddy there, TFC guy. Kills me to think Ali Curtis believes his team can win MLS Cup. The defense has no pace. Yeah, I'm with you, man. The defense is rough. I mean, when Mavinga's there, he can kind of cover for Omar Gonzalez. He wasn't in there till the end of the game, but I'm thinking maybe there's a move. We got that kid who's Morrow. He's been a shell of himself this season. Complete shell of what JMO used to be. I don't know if that's the off the field issues that he's, heading the Black Players Coalition of MLS. He's putting a lot of time into that. Maybe his head's out of the game a little bit. I don't know if it's the fact that finally Father Time has caught up to him now, because I think he's 34 or 35 years old and he's been an MLS player for the last 12 or 13 years. So maybe it's a mixture of all that. I don't know, but he does not look good out there. So I'm glad that we have this young kid coming in from Liverpool and see if he can turn some heads there. But anyways, you have any comments on those games before we move on?
You know what? I just want to real quick to all the Jassie's artist haters, goal and assist against Nashville, second leading scorer in MLS. But yeah, we can move on to the next one. I'm not saying he should start for the USMNT, but stop hating.
Well, I mean, that article there saying that, Josie is the best striker in MLS over Jassie's artist. No, not right now.
No, not now.
I mean, overall pure talent, maybe a year ago. Yes. Josie's gone down a long way as well. So anyways, moving right along, Vancouver and Real Salt Lake. Vancouver gets the victory 2-1. So Vancouver on a bit of a roll there, 2 straight Vancouver victories. And then we've got LA Galaxy and Colorado, 2-0 Colorado. LA Galaxy, what team is this? Is this like a really good team that beats up on people, or is this a team that's just bad? Do they know who they are?
They just got to play LAFC every week, and they'll be fine.
Yeah, I guess so. Portland lays the smackdown on San Jose 6-1, and then Philadelphia 4-1 over Montreal. Romel Kyoto scores a goal and then gets red carded about 10 minutes later.
Oh,
stupid play. Just a crazy elbow right into the guy's neck and head. And, he gets sent off, and Philly took no time to take advantage of that to end up getting the victory. So Philadelphia keeps on rolling, man. The Eastern Conference, the top of the Eastern Conference, right now, it's Columbus and Philly's conference to lose.
No doubt. And, if you want to look out in the Western Conference, because since we were talking about a few of the Western Conference games, it's the exact opposite, man. Right now, Seattle's on top, 21 points, Kansas City 20. The playoff line is the Galaxy and LAFC at 15 points. So the entire conference is within 10 points of each other. And if you remove terrible San Jose, who's had some of the worst defending I have ever seen in my history of watching soccer, and that's going back to AYSO, mind you, between top Seattle and second bottom Real Salt Lake, 7 points. So in 2 weekends, this entire table could flip. That's how wide open the West is, or maybe how tight the West is, depending on how you look at it. Whereas, like you said, Columbus and the Union are kind of running away with the East. Orlando and Toronto are the next 2 teams, but they haven't really shown me that they're going to play with any sort of great consistency. So remains to be determined as who's going to fill out the bottom of the East and the Western conferences. And Mike, That's what I got this week, man. I'm sure we could keep going on and on, but we're right at that hour mark, brother.
Yep, we're right at that hour mark, man. So no, it's been fun, and we'll be back at it. I'll be doing my picks and predictions either around 10:30 or so, or possibly tomorrow at some point as well, maybe during the day while I'm working. We'll see. But overall, been a great night. Thanks again to our sponsors, Skira, Icelandic, Spring Water, as well as nice premium Iceland pure spring. I get them all mixed up anyways. Too much wine for me. It's not Scotch, so the wine's hitting me hard. You ever think you'd hear anybody say that? But no, overall, thanks guys for joining us.
Only when it's in the bottle does it hit me hard.
And so we'll see you guys very soon for picks and predictions, as well as next Sunday night for our live stream reaction, and then again next week. So Rocky, Rose City till I die. Good luck to your Portland Timbers, and we will talk to you guys very soon.
Wow.